the athletes need to learn how to fill out their dive sheet correctly. Dive sheet isn't correct, they can't dive. So they got to fill out their dive sheet correctly. The athletes also need to understand what the judges are looking for. You know, you can do what you think is the prettiest dive in the world. If the judge doesn't like it, you're not going to get good scores. So you need to know the things that the judge wants to see and be sure you do those things. Parents and coaches, you need to help your child fill out the dive sheet, and you need to encourage them when they don't dive as well as they thought they should, or if they don't get the scores they thought they deserved. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. In the past, there have been 3 dive judges, and there are state officials. We think we can do better than that. And if you use 5 judges, then the highest score and the lowest score is discarded. So the 3 middle scores are the ones that are going to count. So if you have some judge, and you know, sometimes we're going to see it's the parent that's their score is a little off. But you know what? We're going to see some of the official scores are off a little bit too. So this is a chance that those scores aren't going to count. In addition, we're putting pressure on these officials to do a better job, because they know we're watching them and they know we know what we're doing. Okay? And finally, the parents that are going to judge and our officials that are here, we want to give you a chance to be a better judge.
George has been really good over the years to keep up with our accomplishments from Gwinnett County divers. And we have the highest percentage of performances in the state of Georgia. We average approximately somewhere in between 46 to 53% of all of the divers that go to state come from Gwinnett County. Does that let you know what we're really producing here? Okay, parents, when you're watching your kids dive, and they go in the water and they're like this, these are legs, this is the head and arm, okay? They'll create an air pocket right here. And it'll sound really, really bad, but the kid's not hurt. But when they come up here and they go like that, that's what they do. And the good thing is that we're swimming. And if we cry, nobody knows.
Each week, your diver is going to be required to do a different dive from a different category. So for our first meet next week, everybody will have to start with something from the 4 dive, front 1.5, something lower in DD, which we'll talk about in a second. And then as the meets go on from week to week, you're going to go through every category. That way your divers, A, aren't getting discomfortable with a couple dives and only doing the same 6 dives. And B, in order to go to county, after you score the correct amount of points, you're going to have to do 11 dives from every category. So this gets your diver into a program of competing a different dive from each group each week. So that is your voluntary dive. And it cannot be higher than a 1.8 DD. DD is how difficult the dive is. Obviously, if you're throwing your body in the air and doing 2 front somersaults, that's going to be much harder than just throwing yourself off the board and doing a front dive. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, 2 somersaults is a lot more difficult. So if you look at the back of this right here, your 11 dive sheet, you have a list of all the degrees of difficulty based on how tough a dive is. If you're doing it in tuck, it's a little bit easier to do than if you're doing it in pike. So pike would be a higher degree of difficulty, and the degree of difficulty gets multiplied by your diver scores that they get in the meet for each dive, which then calculates their total score for that dive. So if you're doing something really difficult and you only score 2s on it, you could end up with the same amount of points as somebody that does a front dive and gets 8s on it. So your degree of difficulty helps you in the cases of getting into state and doing the harder dives, but you just got to make sure that if you're doing the more difficult dives, that you're also competing at a good scale. Otherwise, you're going to want to do something a little simpler which is a lower DD, and do it really well and get good scores on it. So the DD kind of helps out with changing your dives and getting higher scores at the end, which Megan is going to talk about. You need the DD in order to fill out the dive.
This is the sheet that all the divers will fill out for a dual meet or a tri-meet or the floating meet if they're doing 6 dives. We have a meet called the floating meet, which all the divers in the county will be at, and they can either do 6 dives or 11. If they don't know 11 dives yet, they'll be able to do 6 dives in that meet. So this is the sheet that gets filled out for a 6-dive meet. And it's simple at the top. You just put their name and the school they're from, the meet. When you get to the meet on any of the sheet, it's Mill Creek versus DeCula, or Archer versus Park Creek. That's what the meet is for. Boy, girl, date. The order is filled out by the officials, so you do not fill out the order. Okay. In a 6-dive meet, the first dive is the voluntary dive, which to me is crazy. When I was diving 100 years ago, it was called a required dive because it's required to do. Somehow it got changed to voluntary dive, which makes absolutely no sense to me because you're not volunteering, you're required to do it. So the only reason I think it's called voluntary is because you can pick the dive to do out of that group. So if the required group is forward, then you can do a forward dive or a forward somersault. It doesn't have to be a certain dive, it has to be out of the required group. So the first dive is your voluntary dive. And then dives 2 through 6, you have to do at least 4 out of the 5 groups. Now your groups in diving are back here on your DD list. There's a forward, back, reverse, inward, and twist groups. Those are the 5 groups in diving. So you will do 1 voluntary dive out of the required group. And then dives 2 through 6, you can do at least 4, you have to do at least 4 out of the 5. You can do 5 out of 5, but you have to hit at least 4 out of the 5 groups. So if your diver does not know a reverse yet, then they can skip that dive down here, unless it's the week that it's required, voluntary. Okay, your voluntary dive is the one that has the lower degree of difficulty. So if it's the forward group, you would most likely pick a forward dive, a forward somersault, or maybe a forward 1.5. Your higher DDs go down in your optional dives because your degree of difficulty for your voluntary dive cannot be more than 1.8. So if the only thing you can do in the forward group is a forward double, and you put it down as your voluntary dive, you look on the back and the forward double DD is higher than 1.8, you would only get 1.8 for that dive. Okay? If you're doing a dive that's 1.6, you get 1.6. But it cannot be higher than 1.8. If it is, you can do the dive, but you only get 1.8 degree of difficulty. Does that make sense? After you fill out the dives, you're going to fill out the dive number right here, which is on the back also on the degree of difficulty. Each group starts with, the forward start with a 1, the back start with a 2. All of the forward dives are 1 something, the back dives are 2 something, reverse is 3 something. So all of that group starts with the same number. Okay, so you'll look, if you're doing a forward 1.5, you go to the forward group. You go to forward 1.5 SS, which means somersault, and you see the dive number is 103. So you go here to the dive number and you write 103. Then written description, you would write forward FWD, whatever, so you're doing forward 1 somersault, 1 SS. So you write down the description, and then you put the position. The position is A, B, C, and D. We used to do it differently. We used to put S for straight, P for pike, T for tuck, and F for free. It's now changed. We need to do A, B, C, and D. A is straight, and it has it on the back, so you don't have to memorize all this. The divers after 2 meets will know it. But A is straight, B is pike, C is tuck, and D is free. So that's your position that you put down. Okay, so you're going to fill out the dive number, the position, the written description, and then you're going to write in your DD. Okay, so you look on the back, you find out the degree of difficulty, you write it right there, and then you're done with filling out this part of your sheet. This is for your judges' scores, and then this is where they tally the score over here. Okay, after your diver fills it out and your coach looks at it to make sure it's filled out correctly, then the diver signs the sheet, and then the coach signs the sheet. It's very important that both signatures are on here. And the date. The referee signs the rest, and the final and all that is done by the scoring table.